I wanted to give a little overview of what are some of the examples of the elements of personalized learning in action, and use the elements from the Maple organization to kind of do so that we've been working with. I just want to lead this off with it. It's important to understand personalized learning has been happening in a variety of capacities for years within schools, but working with it to improve it and think about how we're doing it on a daily basis is another topic. And also with digital tools, we have an opportunity to kind of isolate and think about how we can do it better with digital tools. So the first one I want to go over is personal connections. This is the use of project-based learning in the classroom. This is also compelling student-driven projects and choice. And basically finding ways to connect with students in a variety of capacities. It could be more than those two bullets that I just listed, of course. But I wanted to provide a couple specific examples of how we could meet this need of personal connections with students. And the first one's just extending student projects that have choice options, giving them an option to do a presentation or make a graphic or make an audio recording. Those are great options for students, and for the teacher to provide them gives them a little advocacy. And of course, anything that provides a student an opportunity to support their sharing of their identity or student advocacy with a project, or having a component of a project which focuses on that piece, really helps with some of the student buy-in to the specific project. And with Google resources, I think we could do this with creating templates that have options for different types of research, maybe on the elementary level, but also on the high school level, giving people more extended options with how maybe the presentation's made, or even what type of resources they're using within a framework of a specific template, or something that kind of gives them choice, but also at the same time, completing the project. I also think online portfolios can also be a great place for students to show how they're connected, particularly to a learning experience. And also, if these can be shared more broadly and connecting them with parents or even with the community on some level, it all helps add to the experience of the education as an experience that the student can connect with personally. Personalized learning path is really looking at how students' learning process and path through school, and also within a particular unit, both expanded and short-term, looking at a learning path, can really support the ownership of the learning, supporting student learning strategies that employ their self-directed and advocacy again, but also helping students develop their own questions around their learning, so that as they continue to learn, they are thinking about what their next steps are. And also that's in the short term and in the long term for all students, is developing questions, thinking about what they're learning, and being reflective, and thinking about how that reflection can kind of create new questions. So with a digital tool, a Google Apps application, some of this can be done with using a shared Google Sheets to map progress in a project or unit. I think providing a curated list of resources so that the students are directed towards a particular list, and then to put that within a framework of a unit so that students have choices of particular resources that they can use in a shared online space can be helpful. And of course, directing students to learn and then process their learning, potentially with providing instructional videos as supports for specific learning tasks, as links in the shared resources. For basically providing students with their own resources that they can then utilize as they need to support their learning path. Competency-based progression is the next area. We all should have heard of, or at least been a little made familiar a little bit with competency-based learning. And part of this is really just understanding that the frameworks of curriculum are well understood, and the goals and sequences within the curriculum are well understood, and that we're setting learning tasks and outcomes for students in specific ways that are measurable. So part of this is really understanding that we are setting a guide for instruction with our students with a clear expectation. Looking at how we can determine very specific measurable learning benchmarks with power standards and working with students to help scaffold these in a long-term project. So this is really around formulating and sharing with students what the project is, how they're going to meet the outcomes of the project, and supporting them all along the way with very specific steps, and so that they all understand that the parts of these projects are competencies and very specific learning tasks. And we want to empower students in that process to track their learning, and also by tracking their learning, it helps teachers guide their instruction, of course. So the idea of any sort of shared digital rubrics with students so that they can check in on their own progress, but also understand what the next steps are with any sort of project. And also it gives the teacher an opportunity to identify learning outcomes for them, so that if they want to jump ahead, they can start to think about what does it look like if they start to jump ahead, but also if they just need to meet a very specific target, that they have that opportunity that day. So it's about getting data to support teacher instruction, which can come in a variety of methods or software, but it's also understanding how the data that we get from grade books, or understanding the interoperability of a piece of software, that we're maybe getting a different type of data within our gradebook to help support the student in the classroom is a huge benefit. So frameworks of curriculum that understand what the next step is, what the sequences are in the lesson or unit, and then also finding data within our practice, whether we collect that from student process and their learning data, to help the teacher guide the instruction. Learner profile. So, some elements of the learner profile include the profile of a graduate, and also data to support differentiation, identifying students' needs and desires for learning. So really getting an understanding of who the student is and how you're going to best support this particular individual student, and doing it in a way that is effective. Within school it's hard. There's lots of different kids. It's very, hard to sometimes manage a lot of different needs. But some ways to help assist in doing this is collecting reflective feedback from students on their learning experiences, and also really, developing meaningful formative assessments and check-ins with students to better understand how they're learning and what their progress is like in the class. These are huge checkpoints to help better not only the teacher understand where the student is coming from, their level of learning, and also what they might need next, but also the student is able to kind of explain themselves. So feedback's important, and also reflecting on feedback and moving back to going back and forth between that process of having the student reflect and also supporting them and guiding their instruction is really important. Also, allowing students to explore college and career or self-directed learning goals. I think this is an important element to allow students to, dream, allow students to think about what they want to do and what they're going to need to know to do what they want to do in the future, and also providing them an opportunity to be self-directed in that attempt to find more information, and supporting them the best you can. I think those are great opportunities. Flexible learning environments. The what, when, how, and where learning happens. So this can include station rotation, seating models, synchronous and asynchronous communication. So I think a very important first step with this is creating an online or digital space for students to collaborate and work both synchronously and asynchronously. And a perfect example of this is Google Classroom, which you could post an assignment there. A student can respond either immediately or later that evening. Providing those opportunities for the collaboration and communication between students within that space is an immediate benefit. I also think we need to consider how learning goals can be better met in traditional classroom settings with modifications to room seating, grouping, and shared expectations in projects. It's just something to think about. How is this particular environment supportive to what the goals of the project are? And sometimes it might mean even changing a room or going to a lab or having more technology to kind of support the learning, but just something, out there in terms of thinking about flexible learning environments. And of course, the final one is technology. And we employ a lot of, SSO, single sign-on, rostering, and also think about how we're transforming the use of student data to support what we want to do in the classroom is huge. That it can include selecting devices. Is it an iPad? Is it a Chromebook that's best? And how are we organizing our learning portals and resources? And where are we directing students? And of course, the number of digital tools that we have. And I think it's just important to remember that a digital tool is just a tool to support learning. How we modify and differentiate the use of the tool is our choice. But we also have to think about how we support student adaptability to the use of the variety of tools. And asking students to use a variety of tools to sometimes meet certain goals. We really want to allow them to be flexible and be able to meet the needs of what they'll need to have in the future. And I think we need to also think about resources and learning portals. How are the sequences in our own instruction reflected in the organization of digital resources? Are we sending students in the right direction? Are we providing, the first, the second, and the third resource in a way that's seamless? Are we also finding ways that make sense for students to best maneuver between the resources? And if we need to make a change, how can we best do that? That's my overview of some of the elements of personalized learning and how they can be met with some of the digital resources in the district. Thank you.